"You're getting married tomorrow," my father said as if he were announcing the weather, not a life-altering decree. I blinked at him, trying to process the absurdity. "To who?" I asked, my voice sharp, almost breaking. "You know her," he said, as if I had been waiting for this introduction my whole life. "It's for the company. Our family can't afford another scandal, and she comes with connections that will secure our future." I laughed, though it sounded hollow in the cold office. "I've never even met her." He ignored me, already marching off, leaving me drowning in disbelief. This was the start of the worst week of my life, or so I thought. The wedding preparations were swift and mechanical, like some cruel theater. Every detail reminded me that this was not love, not romance, just a transaction, signed in ink and legal obligation. And yet, when I finally saw her, standing in a simple cream dress, her hair cascading over her shoulders like sunlight, I felt something unfamiliar stir in something dangerous and warm. Her name was Emily. She looked at me with eyes that were softer than I had expected, but there was fire in them too, like she knew exactly how fragile I was and was determined to protect me. The first time our hands brushed during the ceremony, I flinched, expecting nothing. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she held my hand as though it were precious, and the world shifted just slightly. The first night in our shared home was unbearable and electrifying at the same time. I had expected cold civility, forced smiles, and polite conversation. Instead, Emily sat across from me, her presence filling the room with warmth, and simply said, "You don't have to be afraid. I'm here." I wanted to laugh. Afraid? Afraid of a contract, afraid of the awkwardness, afraid of pretending to be someone I wasn't. But something in her voice, steady and calm, made my defenses crumble. Days passed, and the awkwardness slowly dissolved into familiarity. Emily had this way of observing men in a judgmental way, but as if she could read the parts of me I tried to hide from the world. She noticed when I was tired before I even said a word. She made coffee just the way I liked it without me asking. And she smiled in a way that made my chest ache. One rainy afternoon, I found her in the living room, sketching quietly. I sat down beside her, careful not to disturb her, yet unable to resist the pull toward her. "You're good at this," I said softly, nodding at her sketchbook. She looked up, eyes meeting mine. "I like capturing people as they are, not how the world expects them to be." Something about that line hit me hard. I realized she wasn't just observing me. She was seeing me. Seeing me, not the heiress, not the fragile pawn in some corporate game. We started spending more time together in small stolen moments. Morning walks to the nearby park, late-night conversations on the balcony, our laughter mingling with the city lights. It wasn't love yet, not in the fairy tale sense, but it was real. And dangerous, because the closer I got to her, the more I wanted it to be. The turning point came unexpectedly. Our company was under threat from a hostile competitor. My father's enemies had underestimated us, and suddenly the entire business hung by a thread. I was panicked, ready to collapse under the weight of responsibility. Emily noticed before I even spoke, her hand gripping mine firmly. "You're not alone in this," she said, her voice calm, unwavering. "We'll handle it together." I wanted to argue that she didn't owe me anything, that this was a contract, a legal obligation, not a partnership of hearts. But as I looked at her standing there like a fortress, I realized I didn't want to be alone either. Over the next few weeks, she became my anchor. We strategized together, handled crises together, and slowly my feelings shifted. It wasn't the explosive love I had imagined in novels, but a quiet, persistent pull that refused to let me go. And then one night, after a particularly grueling board meeting, she leaned in and whispered, "You've worked so hard. Let me take care of you." I froze. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that neither contract nor circumstance could explain. My pulse raced, my thoughts scrambled. Could this be love? Could it be that the person I was forced to marry was the one I had been longing for all along? Our first real kiss was hesitant, awkward, but full of unspoken promise. It wasn't about passion or desire alone. It was about safety, trust, and the fragile beauty of being seen. I felt my walls crumble as she pulled me closer, her warmth enveloping me like the home I had never known I needed. Emily had this way of making me feel treasured without saying it outright. Every gesture, every look, every touch told me I mattered. And as the days turned into weeks, I began to see a life where love wasn't a fantasy, it was tangible, breathing, and hers. But the shadow of the contract still lingered. Rumors, business threats, family pressures, they followed me relentlessly. Yet every time I felt fear creeping in, Emily was there, unwavering, protecting me, loving me, making the impossible seem manageable. One evening, as we stood on the rooftop watching the sunset paint the skyline in gold, she slipped her hand into mine. "We've made it this far," she said softly, "and we'll make it through whatever comes next. Together." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "Together," I echoed. And for the first time I meant it. Not because the law required it, not because my family demanded it, but because I wanted to. That night I realized that love could arrive in the most unexpected ways. Forced circumstances had brought us together, but it was our choice, every single day, that made this love real. And as Emily rested her head on my shoulder, I felt a peace I hadn't known existed, a sense of home, of belonging, of finally being seen. The next few weeks blurred into a whirlwind of board meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and endless phone calls. Every time I thought I had a moment to breathe, the phone rang, dragging me back into the chaos of the business. Yet amid the storm, Emily remained my constant. She moved through the house with a quiet confidence, her presence grounding me when my thoughts threatened to spiral out of control. One rainy evening I returned home, soaked to the bone after a particularly brutal negotiation. The city streets glistened under the neon lights, and I could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from the office, and I felt the familiar panic rising in my chest. "Emily," I muttered, collapsing onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. She appeared almost instantly, as if sensing my distress before I even called out. Her arms wrapped around me, pulling me close. "Sure, you're home now," she whispered. Her warmth seeped through my soaked clothes and straight into my trembling nerves. I wanted to push her away, to tell her that she didn't have to deal with my mess. But I couldn't. Instead, I clung to her, letting her steady heartbeat calm the storm inside me. "You're carrying too much alone," she said softly, tilting my chin up to meet her gaze. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of concern and quiet determination, a combination that made my heart ache. "Let me help. You don't have to do this by yourself." Her words struck something deep inside me. I had spent so long believing that I had to be invincible, that showing weakness was a sign of failure. But Emily's presence shattered that illusion. She wasn't judging me, wasn't questioning my strength. She simply offered herself, unwavering and real. Over the next few days, we developed an unspoken rhythm. We worked side by side, tackling crises with a shared determination, but we also found moments of quiet intimacy, sitting together on the balcony with mugs of coffee, sharing stories from our past, and laughing at the absurdities of our lives. It was in those small, seemingly mundane moments that I realized how deeply I had come to rely on her presence. One evening, after a particularly grueling board meeting, we found ourselves alone in the office. The city lights cast a warm glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating her face in a way that made my breath catch. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," she said gently, reaching out to brush a stray lock of hair from my face. "You need to rest." I shook my head, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. "I can't. Not when everything is on the line." She stepped closer, her hand finding mine. "You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Her touch sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to resist, to maintain the walls I had built around myself, but I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't want to. I wanted her in every way that mattered. That night, our first real kiss happened in the quiet of the office. It was tentative at first, almost questioning, as if we were both unsure of the boundaries between obligation and desire. But then it deepened, growing more confident and insistent, as if every suppressed emotion, every fleeting glance and touch, had led to this exact moment. The days that followed were a delicate dance of stolen glances and secret touches. We moved carefully, aware of the delicate balance between our public personas and the private world we were creating together. It wasn't easy. Every smile, every lingering look had to be measured, every touch hidden from the prying eyes of colleagues and family. Yet, the tension only made our connection stronger, more urgent. One afternoon, while reviewing financial reports in the study, I looked up to find Emily leaning against the doorframe, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "You've been staring at those numbers for hours," she teased, walking over to perch on the edge of the desk. "You need a break." I groaned, rubbing my temples. "There's no time for a break. If we don't secure these contracts, everything could fall apart." She reached out, placing her hand over mine. "Then let me help you. You're not in this alone, remember?" Her touch was electric, a jolt of warmth that made it impossible to focus on anything else. I wanted to protest, to insist that I could handle it, but the truth was undeniable. I needed her. More than I had ever admitted, even to myself. As the days turned into weeks, our bond deepened. We shared more than just work. We shared fears, hopes, and dreams we had never voiced to anyone else. Emily had a way of drawing out the best in me, of making me see that vulnerability was not weakness, but a form of strength. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, we found ourselves on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. The air was cool and crisp, and the silence between us was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not in this mess of a life." She turned to face me, her eyes shining with quiet intensity. "And yet, here we are," she replied softly, slipping her hand into mine. "You're not alone anymore. You don't have to be." Her words were a balm to the chaos that had consumed me for so long. I leaned into her, feeling the weight of the world lift, if only for a moment. The next morning brought new challenges. A hostile takeover attempt threatened to unravel everything we had worked for. The tension in the office was palpable, every decision critical, every misstep potentially catastrophic. Yet, through it all, Emily remained by my side, a steady presence in the storm. During a particularly heated meeting with the board, I glanced at her across the table. Her eyes met mine, and in that brief moment, the chaos around us faded. She smiled just slightly, and I felt a surge of confidence. With her support, I was no longer just an heiress trying to save a company. I was a partner, capable and determined, with someone who believed in me completely. That evening, after the board meeting ended, Emily and I stayed late, working through the final details of the contracts. The office was quiet, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. "You've been incredible," she said softly, brushing a hand against my shoulder. "I don't know what I would do without you." I swallowed hard, my chest tight. "I don't know what I would do without you either," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. She smiled, a tender, knowing smile that made my heart ache. "Good," she whispered, leaning closer. "Because I'm not going anywhere. Ever." Our first night away from the pressures of work was spent in a small cabin Emily had booked in the countryside. Surrounded by trees and the soft sound of rain against the windows, we finally allowed ourselves to relax, to be just Emily and me, not business partners, not contractually bound strangers. We talked for hours, sharing stories from our childhoods, laughing at embarrassing memories, and revealing dreams we had long buried. It was in these moments that I realized how deeply I had come to care for her, not just as someone who protected me, but as someone who understood me, who saw me in a way no one else ever had. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Emily reached out and took my hand. "You've been carrying so much for so long," she said softly. "Let me share the load. Let me be your partner in everything." I nodded, unable to speak, tears welling in my eyes. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly understood, and truly loved. Our relationship continued to grow stronger, even as the pressures of the business world loomed over us. Emily became my confidant, my partner, and my safe place. I learned to trust her completely, to rely on her strength and guidance, and in turn, she taught me to embrace vulnerability as a form of courage. The turning point came when a major investor threatened to pull out, jeopardizing everything. I was on the verge of panic when Emily stepped in, calmly navigating the negotiations, her confidence and intelligence shining through. Watching her handle the situation with such grace and determination, I realized that our bond had transformed me. I was no longer the frightened, isolated girl my father had tried to control. I was a woman capable of facing challenges, of standing tall with someone I loved by my side. That night, after the crisis was averted, we sat together on the balcony, holding hands and watching the stars. "We did it," I whispered, leaning into her warmth. Emily smiled, her head resting against mine. We always do. Together. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe in a future filled with love, partnership, and mutual respect. The contract that had brought us together had been nothing more than a beginning. What we had built since then, trust, understanding, and a deep abiding love, was real, and it was ours. Even as the city below bustled with its usual chaos, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. Emily's presence had transformed my life, teaching me that love was not just a fairy tale, but a choice, a daily commitment to see, protect, and cherish one another. And as I held her close, feeling her heartbeat sync with mine, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as partners, as lovers, as the kind of family we had chosen to be. The following weeks were a whirlwind, the company finally stabilizing after the hostile takeover attempt. But even as the business chaos settled, life wasn't without its tests. Old rivals resurfaced, and my family's expectations remained a constant pressure. Yet, Emily and I had learned to navigate the storm together. The contract that had once felt like a chain now felt like a bridge connecting us, anchoring us, giving purpose to every shared struggle. One afternoon, Emily came into my office, her eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and determination. "Pack a bag," she said casually, as if announcing a simple errand, not the life-changing plan she had in mind. "Where?" I asked, already feeling my pulse quicken. "Somewhere we can breathe," she replied, her smile softening. "Just us. No contracts, no board meetings, no expectations." I hesitated, thinking of all the unresolved work, the meetings I couldn't miss, the endless responsibilities that still lingered. But when I looked at her, standing there with that quiet confidence, I realized she was offering me something far more important than any business success, a chance to reclaim a life that had almost been swallowed by obligation. We left the city behind, driving through winding country roads that smelled of wet earth and autumn leaves. The world outside seemed to slow down with every mile, and by the time we reached a small lakeside cabin, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. The cabin was modest but cozy, with a fireplace that crackled warmly, and large windows framing the lake's serene waters. Emily unpacked our bags with the same care she had shown in every detail of our lives together. Every movement was deliberate, gentle, a reminder of the affection and trust that had grown between us. That night after dinner, we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, the cool breeze brushing against our faces. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, her fingers entwined with mine. "You've done so much," she whispered. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here. Always." Her words struck me deeply. I realized I had been living with a constant weight, the fear of failure, the pressure to prove myself, the anxiety of being alone. But now, with Emily beside me, that weight felt manageable. Her presence wasn't just comforting, it was transformative. As darkness settled over the lake, we finally let ourselves relax completely. I laughed freely for the first time in months, feeling the tension that had built up in my shoulders and chest melt away. Emily mirrored my laughter, her eyes sparkling in the firelight, and in that moment, I understood that this freedom, this peace, this closeness was love in its truest form. Over the next few days, we explored the surrounding woods, walked along the lake's edge, and shared our dreams for the future. We talked about everything we had hidden from each other before, the fears, the regrets, the longing for a life that felt authentic and free. Every confession brought us closer, cementing the bond that had started with a forced contract, but had evolved into something profound and unbreakable. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the water, Emily turned to me, her expression serious yet tender. "I have something to ask you," she said softly, taking both of my hands in hers. My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" I asked, already sensing the gravity of the moment. "I want us to choose each other every day," she said, her voice unwavering. "Not because of a contract, not because of obligation, but because we love each other. Will you marry me? For real this time?" Tears welled in my eyes. My chest ached with a mixture of disbelief, joy, and overwhelming emotion. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes, Emily. I will." We embraced, and in that embrace I felt every burden, every fear, every doubt melt away. This was no longer about family expectations or business survival. It was about user love, our choice, and our shared future. Returning to the city felt different. The skyline, once a symbol of pressure and obligation, now seemed alive with possibility. We continued our work, but the weight that had once suffocated me was gone. Emily and I faced challenges together, but now we did so as partners in every sense, not just legally or professionally, but emotionally, spiritually, and fully. One evening after a particularly successful board meeting, Emily and I sat together on the balcony of our apartment, overlooking the city that had once felt like a cage. The air was warm, the lights twinkling like stars below. She rested her head on my shoulder, her fingers entwined with mine. "You've grown so much," she said softly. "I've watched you fight for everything you care about, and now I see the woman you've always been meant to be." I smiled, leaning into her warmth. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. "You made me brave, made me believe in myself, made me happy." Emily looked up, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We made it together," she said. "And we'll keep making it together, no matter what comes next." In the weeks and months that followed, our life settled into a rhythm of balanced work, love, and shared joy. We celebrated small victories, comforted each other through setbacks, and nurtured a love that had grown from obligation into something extraordinary. The final test came unexpectedly. My father fell seriously ill, and the weight of responsibility fell back onto my shoulders. Old fears resurfaced, threatening to pull me back into the anxious, isolated person I had once been. But Emily remained steadfast, standing by my side with unwavering support. She handled the logistics, comforted my family, and ensured that I didn't collapse under the pressure. One night, after a particularly long day at the hospital, we walked through the quiet streets, hands intertwined, the city around us muted and calm. "You're incredible," I whispered, resting my head against hers. "You've saved me more times than I can count." She smiled softly, pressing a kiss to my temple. "We save each other," she replied. "And we always will." That moment crystallized everything I had learned about love, trust, and partnership. Love wasn't just passion or desire, it was steadfastness, support, and the quiet assurance that someone had your back, no matter what. Emily had taught me that, and I had come to understand that our bond was unbreakable. In the months that followed, we celebrated our official wedding, a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. There were no grandiose displays or extravagant promises, only two women who had chosen each other against all odds, who had discovered a love that was resilient, tender, and fiercely protective. As we exchanged vows, I looked into Emily's eyes and saw the reflection of every shared struggle, every moment of laughter, every night spent holding each other close. "I promise to see you, protect you, and love you every day," I whispered, my voice filled with emotion. She responded with equal sincerity, her hands gripping mine tightly. "I promise the same. You are my home, my strength, and my heart. Always." And in that moment, surrounded by those who mattered most, I realized that love had indeed arrived in the most unexpected way. A forced contract had led to a choice to fight for each other, to trust, and to love with everything we had. Emily and I spent the evening dancing in our living room, the city lights casting a gentle glow around us. We laughed, whispered sweet nothings, and held each other close, savoring the quiet joy of being together. The burdens of business, family, and expectation had not vanished entirely, but they had lost their power over us. Life, I realized, wasn't about escaping challenges, it was about facing them with someone who truly understood and cherished you. And in Emily, I had found that person. My partner, my protector, my love. As the night deepened and the city outside settled into quiet slumber, we lay side by side, hands entwined, hearts beating in sync. "I never imagined life could feel like this," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. Emily smiled, brushing her hair from my face. "Neither did I," she replied softly. "But I'm so glad it does. With you it's perfect." And in that perfect moment, I knew that we had found something rare and precious, something that could not be manufactured, purchased, or forced. It was ours, forged through struggle, nurtured with care, and sealed with the unshakable bond of love. No contract, no expectation, no obstacle could ever diminish what we had built. Together we were unstoppable, unbreakable, and infinitely in love. The sun rose the next morning, painting the city in shades of gold. Emily stirred beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment I had never known before. The journey had been long, filled with trials and heartache, but it had led us here to each other, to a love that was steadfast, tender, and true. And as we watched the city awaken, hands entwined, hearts aligned, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Not as two individuals bound by obligation, but as two souls who had chosen each other every single day. In Emily I had found my home, my heart, and my treasure. And I would protect her, cherish her, and love her for the rest of my life. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.